Hey guys, before you start watching this video, I really need to include a pointer. So this story is about not an actual castle. It's actually just about a big house. But it's actually a chateau, which is referred to as a castle, a house. It's more of like a general meaning of like a bigger home, like a mansion of some sort. So just so you guys wouldn't get confused, whenever I say castle, I don't really mean a castle. I actually include the photos of the actual chateau. I had to point this out so you guys just wouldn't get confused about it. And I hope you guys understand and enjoy the video. Calvados Castle. The Great Calvados Castle was constructed around 1835. It was built on a pre-existing building of some sort. But from the 12th of October of 1875 to January 30th of 1876, the occupants of Calvados Castle had experienced a massive activity poltergeist. The specific name of this castle, or in this case, a chateau, was Chateau de Noyes de Tourneur. The very first of these paranormal incidents had been experienced by the tutor of the master's son. A master of a household was one that had ownership of the house and was another way of saying the person in charge of the household. The master's son witnessed a chair moving across the floor, but later on that same day in the evening, he heard loud banging coming from the walls of his bedroom. Just the next evening, loud blows and bangs were heard all over the castle. The master and servants looked all over, but no one was found making these horrifying noises. This problem would persist over the course of 3 months. The parish priest was invited to stay the night at the castle. He recalled the next day he heard footsteps, but not just any footsteps, but loud, heavy footsteps descending the staircase in the early morning hours. Once he came up with the conclusion that the castle had a supernatural nature behind it, he left shortly afterwards. On Halloween, activity in the Calvados Castle seemed to only get far worse. The green room had been the source of everything that was going on. Loud bangs and heavy footsteps were heard in that room, which kept the occupants in the castle up until the early hours of the mornings. A violent November rainstorm had been a terrifying night for the occupants in the Calvados Castle. The ghost that was causing the paranormal activity had acquired a voice of some sort. The household heard a long shriek that sounded of plead and help, but it sounded as if it was someone outside in the storm crying for help. Then the next cry sounded as if it was inside the castle. Lastly, 3 sorrowful moans sounded from the staircase area. But just the next evening, more sobs and cries were being heard in the green room. The cry sounded of a woman to be in terrible suffering. The next few nights, the cries and shrieks became more intensified, with more shrill and more despairing. The cousin of the master's wife came to visit. He was an army officer, and he scoffed at everything he had heard about the castle. Great courage he had, He had insisted on sleeping in the green room, despite the others' plea to not sleep in there. He said to them, "You need not to worry about me." He also said he always had his revolver on his side. The officer boldly walked into the green room, left a burning candle as a nightlight. He was eventually sound asleep, but only for a short time. His sleep was interrupted by the sound of soft rustling of a silken robe. Immediately, the officer knew his candle was extinguished, and he felt tugging on the covers of his bed. He had a gruff demand to know who was there, but instantly the response he got was a cold breath of air blow out the candle he just relit. As the rustling noises became louder, there was also something trying to forcefully take off his bedclothes. The officer shouted that whoever was there must declare themselves or he would shoot. The only response he had was a tug on the covers. Going by the rustling noises, the officer figured out where the noises were coming from, and he immediately shot that area. Instead, he shot the wall and dug the bullets out the next morning. Between everyone in the household, the son's tutor suffered the most of the hauntings. Whenever the cleric left the room, he was always making sure that the windows were bolted shut and the door locked shut, and he always had the keys fastened secure to his waist. Upon his return to the room, he would find his furniture overturned and cushions scattered all over the place. Not only that, his windows were open and his armchair on top of his desk. He made an attempt to nail the windows closed, but when he came back, it was once again wide open. Also, by way of punishment, the couch cushions were found balanced perfectly on his outside windowsill. On another occasion, the cleric left the room and comes back to all of his books on the floor. All the books except the Holy Scripture, meaning the Bible. The Bible stayed on the shelves, but that is not all that the cleric experienced. One occasion, he was stirring the coal in the fireplace. Without warning, a huge wave of water rushed down the chimney, extinguishing the fire, but blinded the cleric with flying sparks and was covered with ashes. The tutor, or also known as the cleric, concluded that all these occurrences had to be the work of the devil. It is now considered as a classic poltergeist behavior, childlike behavior. This invisible creature one night wanted to be accepted into all the rooms of the household. It knocked once or twice on everyone else's room but the cleric. It had knocked and banged a consecutive 40 times on the cleric's door before it went and thumped around in the green room. The only peace that came to that household was when a reverend known by the name Reverend H.L. Cannon was sent to the household by the bishop. From when the reverend entered the household until he left, there was not even the slightest noise. But once he left, there was a sound as if a body had fallen in the first floor passage. Following the sound was the sound of a ball rolling, delivering a violent blow to the green room. And then, just then, the haunting began once again. It's as if the demons are very much afraid of any priest that entered the household, or just priests in general. On January 20th, 1876, the master had left for a 2-day visit to his brother, leaving his wife to keep up with the journal of the haunting that's going on in their home. Her name, which was not disclosed, was referred to as Madame de X, or Madame X in this case. Madame X recalled hearing an eerie bellowing, like a bull that bothered everyone in the household during the time the master was away. A weird drumming of some sort was also reported, and the sound of sticks striking the staircase. When the master returned to the castle, the haunting only got worse and more violent than before. It had stormed into the rooms of Auguste, the gardener, and Emile, the coachman, and turned their beds over. It stormed into the master's study room and threw all of his books, maps, and papers on the floor. The midnight screams got way worse in shrillness and urgency, with the sound of the bull and the cries of many animals. The sounds to have been coming from the direction of Maurice, the master's son's room. The amount of blows on his door from all the banging shook every window in the house. The parish priest had arrived one night on January 26. He had arrived with the intention of conducting the rites of an exorcism. He had also arranged a novena of masses to be said at Lourdes that would also be joined with his performance of the ritual, which was aimed to put the spirit or spirits to rest. It is as if 2 exorcism performances are being conducted at the same time. The novena of masses is a term designating a spiritual devotion consisting of the recitation of a set form of prayer for 9 consecutive days. The priest's arrival was not a friendly one. He heard a long, drawn-out cry and had heard what sounded like a stampede of hoofed creatures running in the passage of the first floor. There what sounded to be heavy boxes being moved, and Maurice's door began to shake as if something was demanding entrance. At the climax of the exorcism, which was around 11:15 p.m. on the night of January 29th, a piercing cry like that of a beast that had been dealt its death blow began to ring the whole castle. A series of rappings began to rain on the green room door. At around 12:55 a.m., the residents of the Calvados castle heard the voice of a man in the very first floor passage area. The master documented it in his journal. It seemed to cry, "Ha ha!" and shortly after there was 10 loud bangs and blows shaking everything everywhere. A final blow struck the door of the green room, then sounds of coughing coming from the first floor passage. After the exorcism was done, the family rose and cautiously roamed the castle, not sure if everything was done. The priest slumped in exhaustion. Lots of sweat was beading from his forehead. There was no more sounding of hammer fist, no screaming, no more shaking doors, no more furniture shifting. Apparently, an earthenware plate had been broken into 10 pieces at the door of Madame X's room. No one has ever recalled seeing this plate before either. Earthenware plates are plates that are ceramic and have been glazed and fired, meaning it's not very durable and it's very prone to chipping as opposed to other dinnerware plates. After believing the haunting was over, a few days later, Madame X was sitting at a writing desk when all those holy medals and crosses dropped in front of her on her paper. It was as if the ghost or the demon was telling the residents that it was not gone for good. Towards the end of August, soft knocking began to be heard. On the third Sunday in September, the drawing room's furniture was arranged in what looked to be a horseshoe fashion, with the couch right in the middle of it. A few days later, Madame X was laying terrified in her bed when she witnessed her bedroom door latch being opened and the door creaking slowly and slamming shut. After everything, the haunting was only brief after the exorcism. The ghost seemed to be content with playing the organ and to move some furniture around here and there of Maurice's new tutor's room. Eventually, everything became weaker and weaker until the only thing that was haunting was the memory of the terrible months that happened at the Calvados castle, or also known as Chateau de Noyers de Tourneur.